Hey everyone, welcome back. I've got another story for you tonight, and this one's a ride from start to finish. We're building a cozy little cottage in the background while I walk you through what happens when someone secretly living in your house turns out to have plans way darker than just stealing your leftovers. Before we dive in, I want to express my gratitude. Your support, every like, every comment, genuinely means a lot. I read every message, and it's a big part of what keeps me going. Thank you. This story starts with missing food and ends with felony charges, a stolen identity plot, and a confrontation that'll make your skin crawl. So let's jump in, because the moment our storyteller set up that hidden camera, everything changed. I need to start by saying this sounds like something out of a horror movie, but I promise you, this actually happened to me. It started small, really small. The kind of thing you second guess yourself about because it seems too paranoid to even mention out loud. I live alone in a two-story house I inherited from my grandmother about 3 years ago. It's older, kind of creaky, but it's mine and I loved it. About 6 months ago, I started noticing weird things, little things that didn't quite add up, like I'd make a full pot of spaghetti on Sunday, portion it out for the week, and by Wednesday there'd only be 2 containers left instead of 4. I chalked it up to eating more than I thought. Then my favorite blanket went missing. The soft grey one I kept on the couch. I tore the house apart looking for it. Never found it. Then the shampoo. I'm not joking when I say I went through a full bottle in like 10 days when it normally lasts me a month. I actually stood in the shower one morning just staring at the bottle thinking I was losing my mind. Was I using more? Was there a leak? It didn't make sense. I started keeping a mental inventory of everything. Toilet paper running out faster. A box of crackers I swore I'd just opened suddenly half empty. Food disappearing from the fridge. I thought maybe I was developing early onset dementia or something. I'm only 28, but stranger things have happened, right? I even Googled it, spent an embarrassing amount of time on WebMD convincing myself I had some rare condition. But then something happened that I couldn't explain away. I was home on a Tuesday afternoon working from my kitchen table when I heard it. Footsteps directly above me, slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the floor of my bedroom. I froze. My laptop was still open in front of me, my coffee was still warm, and someone was walking around upstairs in my house. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sat there for what felt like an hour but was probably 30 seconds, just listening. The footsteps stopped. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, but then I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if it's the house settling, or a squirrel in the attic, or literally anything else? I didn't want to be that person who calls 911 because their house made a noise. So I did the stupid horror movie thing. I went upstairs, I checked every room, every closet, under the beds, nothing, no one. But my bedroom window was open, just a crack. And I never opened that window. It's painted shut, or at least it was supposed to be. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with a kitchen knife next to me like that was going to do anything, and I waited. Nothing happened. But the next day, I went to the hardware store and bought a hidden camera, one of those little ones that looks like a phone charger. I set it up in the attic, pointed at the main area, and connected it to an app on my phone so I could watch the feed from anywhere. For 2 days, nothing. I started to feel ridiculous, like I'd just wasted $80 on paranoia. But on the third night at 2:17 in the morning, I got a motion alert on my phone. I was in bed, half asleep, and the notification lit up my screen. I opened the app and I swear to you, my blood went cold. There was a man in my attic, a full-grown man crawling through a gap in the corner near the vent that leads outside. He had a backpack. He was wearing my blanket around his shoulders like a cape, and he looked comfortable, like he'd done this 100 times. I watched him move around, setting up what looked like a sleeping bag, pulling out a water bottle, and then, I kid you not, he pulled out a bag of my leftovers and started eating them with a plastic fork. My leftovers, from my fridge. He'd been down there, in my house. While I was home, I didn't move. I just watched. I needed to see more. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. He sat there for about 20 minutes scrolling on his phone, completely at ease, and then he laid down and went to sleep, in my attic, like it was a hotel. I called the police, I told them everything, showed them the footage. They came out, searched the attic, but by the time they got there, he was gone. Probably heard them pull up. They found the sleeping bag, some trash, a few of my things he'd taken. but no person. The officer told me they'd increased patrols in the area and advised me to get better locks. That was it. They said unless I had more evidence or caught him in the act, there wasn't much they could do. That wasn't even the worst part. I went up to the attic myself the next day, in broad daylight, with pepper spray and my phone ready to call for help. I wanted to see what he'd left behind, and what I found made my skin crawl. There were photos, printed photos, of me. Pictures of me getting my mail, pictures of me in my car, pictures of me through my kitchen window. He'd been watching me for weeks, maybe months. There was a notebook. I opened it and saw my schedule written out, my work hours, when I went to the gym, when I got groceries. He knew my routine better than I did. And then I found the receipts, Amazon orders, delivered to my address, things I never ordered, clothes, shoes, a laptop. He'd been using my address to ship things to himself and picking them up when I wasn't home. I felt like I was going to throw up. This wasn't just some random squatter. This was planned. This was deliberate. He'd been living in my house, watching me, stealing from me, and I had no idea. I called the police again, showed them everything. They took it more seriously this time, but they still said I needed to catch him in the act. So I came up with a plan. I told a few people I was going out of town for the weekend, posted on social media about a girl's trip, made it obvious I'd be gone, but I wasn't going anywhere. I set up multiple cameras, one in the attic, one in my bedroom, one in the kitchen. I parked my car a few blocks away and stayed at a friend's place nearby so I could watch the feeds on my phone. And then I waited. It didn't take long. Friday night around 11, the attic camera picked him up crawling through the vent. But this time he didn't stay in the attic. He came downstairs. I watched him walk through my house like he owned it. He went into my bedroom, opened my closet, started going through my clothes, and then he tried them on. My clothes. He put on one of my hoodies, looked at himself in the mirror, and smiled. I'm not exaggerating. He smiled. I genuinely thought this couldn't get worse. I was wrong. He went to my desk, opened my laptop, which I'd intentionally left out and unlocked, and started going through my files, my documents, my emails. He screenshot my banking information, wrote down passwords. I had everything I needed, but I kept watching because I needed to know what he was planning. He pulled out his phone and called someone. I couldn't hear the conversation through the camera, but I watched him gesture around my room, laugh, and nod like he was confirming something. Then he hung up and went to my closet again. This time he pulled out a suitcase, my suitcase, and started packing my things, my clothes, my jewelry, my grandmother's watch. That's when I called the police again, told them I had him on camera, live, in my house, stealing my things. They said they'd send someone immediately. I texted my friend who lived 2 streets over and asked her to come with me. I wasn't going in alone. By the time we got there were already 2 squad cars outside. The officers were waiting for my signal. I unlocked the door as quietly as possible, and they went in. I stayed outside watching the feed on my phone. They found him in my bedroom, suitcase half packed, wearing my hoodie. They arrested him on the spot: burglary, trespassing, identity theft. The list went on. I went inside after they took him out, and I just stood in my living room, shaking. One of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. I said absolutely. Here's where it gets absurd. During the interrogation, he confessed, not just to living in my attic, but to why. He said he'd been preparing to assume my identity. He knew my grandmother had passed and left me the house. He knew I was the sole heir to her estate, and he thought if he could become me, learn everything about me, he could somehow steal my inheritance. He'd been ordering things to my address to build a credit history under my name. He had fake IDs in the works. He'd been planning this for months, and he genuinely thought he could pull it off. The officers told me he's facing multiple felonies: identity theft, stalking, burglary, fraud. He's looking at serious prison time. They also found out he'd done this before. Not the identity theft part, but the squatting. He had a history of breaking into people's homes and living there without them knowing. I sold that house 3 weeks later. I couldn't stay there. Every creak, every noise. I thought he was back. I moved into an apartment with actual security, cameras everywhere, and a doorman. I don't care if it costs more. I need to feel safe. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're as addicted to Reddit drama as I am. Make sure to subscribe and tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Seriously, I want to know who else is listening to these stories at 2 a.m. like I am. Now, back to the madness, because that guy rotting in jail isn't even close to the worst thing I've uncovered. I still check my attic. Even though I don't have one anymore, I check closets, I check vents. I installed security cameras in every room. My friends think I'm paranoid, but they didn't live through it. They didn't watch a stranger wear their clothes and plan to steal their entire life. The worst part, and I mean this, is that he was so close to getting away with it. If I hadn't heard those footsteps that one Tuesday afternoon, if I hadn't trusted my gut and set up that camera, he could still be there, living in my attic, watching me, waiting. I testified at his trial, looked him right in the eye. He didn't look sorry, he looked annoyed, like I'd ruined his plan. And honestly, I hope he rots in that cell, because what he did wasn't just criminal. It was violating in a way I still can't fully process. So yeah, that's my story. I found a stranger secretly living in my house, and I exposed his disturbing plan before he could destroy my life. And if you think that's bad, trust me, it gets worse. But living with a stranger in your attic is one thing. What happens when the person watching you is someone you see every single day? I got a text from a friend one afternoon that made my stomach drop. No context, just a link and the message, "You need to see this." I clicked it thinking maybe it was some meme or news article, and instead I found myself staring at a forum I'd never heard of. And there, posted by someone with a username I didn't recognize, were photos of me. Dozens of them. Me sleeping. Me doing yoga in my living room. Me walking around in a towel after a shower. Me changing clothes, all taken through my bedroom window. I didn't even know how to process it at first. My brain just kind of froze. I scrolled through the thread, and every single image was of me, in my own apartment doing completely normal things, except someone had been watching. Someone had been taking pictures. The captions made it so much worse. Disturbing fantasies written out in detail. Comments from other users, people discussing me like I was some kind of object, like I wasn't a real person. I felt physically sick. I ran to my window and looked outside, suddenly hyper aware that someone could be watching me right then. I closed the blinds, all of them, every window in my apartment. I sat on my floor with my back against the wall, shaking, trying to figure out what to do. I screenshot everything, every photo, every comment, every username. Then I called the police. They took my report, listened to everything I had to say, looked at the screenshots, and then they basically told me there wasn't much they could do. The forum was hosted overseas, the IP address was masked, the username was anonymous. Unless I could identify who was actually taking the photos, they couldn't pursue it. They suggested I get better curtains and maybe a security system. That was it. I wanted to scream. Someone had been violating my privacy for who knows how long, posting it online for strangers to see, and the response was just, "Get better curtains." But I didn't scream. I thanked them for their time, hung up, and decided I'd figure this out myself. First thing I did was buy blackout curtains, the kind that don't let even a sliver of light through. I installed them on every window. Then I started thinking about the angles. Whoever took those photos had a clear view into my bedroom and living room. That meant they were either really close or using a zoom lens. I lived on the 4th floor, so it wasn't someone on the street. It had to be another building. I went outside and looked up at my apartment from different angles, trying to figure out where the photos could have been taken from. There were a few buildings nearby, but only one had a direct line of sight into my windows, the apartment complex across the courtyard, specifically the units on the same floor as mine. I started paying attention. I'd stand near my window, lights off, curtains cracked just enough to see out, and I'd watch. I felt ridiculous at first, like I was the one being creepy now, but I needed to know. And then one night around 11, I saw it. A glint of light, just a flash, but it was there, coming from the apartment directly across from mine. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in as much as I could. I couldn't see details, but I could see the outline of someone standing near their window. And I could see something in their hands, something that looked a lot like a camera. My heart was racing. I needed proof, real proof, something the police couldn't dismiss. So I went out the next day and bought my own camera, a decent one with a good zoom lens. I set it up on a tripod near my window, angled toward the apartment across the way, and I waited. It took 3 nights before I caught him, 3 nights of sitting in the dark, watching, recording, and then there he was, standing at his window with a telephoto lens, pointing it directly at my apartment. I had the camera recording. I had timestamps. I had everything. I zoomed in as much as I could and got a clear shot of his face. And that's when I realized I knew him. Not well, but I'd seen him before. He was my neighbor. Not in my building, but in the one across the courtyard. We'd passed each other in the shared courtyard a few times. He'd even smiled at me once, made small talk about the weather. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't some random stranger. This was someone I saw regularly. Someone who knew where I lived because he lived right across from me. I took all the footage, printed out screenshots, and went back to the police. This time, I had a face. I had evidence. I had proof. They took it seriously. They contacted him, brought him in for questioning, and within a week they had enough to charge him. But that wasn't even the worst part. When they searched his apartment, they found more. A hard drive full of photos and videos. Not just of me. Other women in the building too. He'd been doing this for over a year. Watching, recording, posting. He had folders organized by person. My folder had hundreds of files. Some I recognized from the forum. Others I'd never seen. Videos of me sleeping. Of me talking on the phone. Just existing in my own space, completely unaware. The police told me he'd been escalating. The timestamps showed he was watching more frequently, spending hours at his window. They said it was good I caught it when I did, because people like him don't just stop. They escalate. I was given the option to press charges. They asked if I wanted to move forward. I didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. I wanted him buried under the legal system. I wanted him to face every consequence possible. He tried to contact me before the court date. Sent me messages through mutual neighborhood connections begging me not to go through with it, saying he was sorry, that he had a problem and he'd get help, that he didn't mean for it to go this far, like that was supposed to make it better, like being sorry erased the months of violation. I ignored all of it. I showed up to court, I gave my statement, I watched him sit there, head down, while the prosecutor laid out everything he'd done, the photos, the videos, the forum posts, the other victims who'd also come forward after my case went public. He pleaded guilty, didn't even try to fight it. His lawyer probably told him there was no point. The evidence was overwhelming. He got 2 years in prison. Not as much as I wanted, honestly, but it was something. And he's now a registered offender. His name is on a public list. Anyone can look him up and see exactly what he did. And here's where it gets absurd. After sentencing, his family reached out to me, not to apologize, to ask me to write a letter to the parole board when the time came, to give him a second chance, to show mercy. I didn't respond. I blocked them. The audacity to ask me, the person he violated for months, to help reduce his sentence was almost impressive in how tone-deaf it was. I moved apartments 2 months later. I couldn't stay there. Every time I looked out my window, I saw his. Every time I walked through the courtyard, I remembered passing him, smiling at him, having no idea what he was doing. I found a new place on a higher floor with no buildings nearby, no direct sight lines. I installed cameras inside and outside my apartment. I check every window before I go to bed. I still think about it, more than I want to admit. I'll be getting ready in the morning and I'll pause, look around, and wonder if anyone's watching. I know it's irrational. I know I'm safe now. But that feeling of being observed, of being violated in the one place you're supposed to feel secure, it doesn't just go away. My friends tell me I'm paranoid, that I'm being too cautious, but they didn't go through it. They didn't see their own face on a forum full of strangers discussing them like they were entertainment. They didn't watch footage of someone standing at a window with a camera pointed at their bedroom. I don't talk about it much anymore. It's exhausting to relive. But every now and then someone will ask why I'm so weird about curtains, or why I insist on upper floor apartments with no facing buildings, and I'll give them the short version, and they'll look at me like I'm overreacting, until I show them the court documents, then they get it. The whole thing taught me that privacy is fragile, that the people you pass in the hallway, smile at in the courtyard, share a building with, you don't really know them, you don't know what they're capable of. And sometimes the person violating you isn't some shadowy figure in the dark. It's someone you've seen before, someone who knows your routine, someone who's been watching the whole time. I'm glad I trusted my gut. I'm glad I didn't just accept the first response from the police and move on. I'm glad I investigated, because if I hadn't, he'd still be out there, still watching, still posting, still violating people who had no idea. He's in prison now, and when he gets out, his life is going to be a lot harder. Registered offender status follows you. Jobs, housing, relationships, it all gets scrutinized. And honestly, I don't feel bad about it. Not even a little. He made his choices. He knew what he was doing, and now he gets to live with the consequences. I still check every window. I probably always will. But at least now, I know I'm the only one watching. And that's how it should be. You'd think your own family would never violate your trust like that, but sometimes the people closest to you hide the ugliest secrets. I never thought my own brother would try to destroy my life, but here we are. It started with a phone call from my mum. She was crying, which immediately put me on edge because my mum doesn't cry easily. She asked me how I could do this to the family, how I could steal from my own brother. I had no idea what she was talking about. Apparently, my brother had just told my entire family that I'd stolen $10,000 from him. $10,000. He claimed I had a gambling addiction and had been secretly draining his accounts to fund it. The thing is, I don't gamble. I've maybe bought a lottery ticket twice in my life. I don't even like casinos. The whole accusation was so absurd I actually laughed when she first said it. But she wasn't laughing. Neither was my dad when he got on the line. They were furious, disappointed. They kept asking me why I would do this, how I could lie to their faces. I tried to explain that I hadn't done anything, that this was insane, but they wouldn't listen. My brother had apparently shown them proof, bank statements, text messages, a whole paper trail that proved I'd been stealing from him for months. I asked to see the evidence. They refused, said my brother didn't want to involve me directly because he was too hurt, too betrayed. He just wanted the family to know the truth so they could cut me off and protect themselves from my lies. And that's exactly what they did. My parents stopped answering my calls. My sister blocked me on everything. Family group chats went silent the second I'd post anything. It was like I'd been erased. And the worst part was, I had no idea what evidence he'd even fabricated. I couldn't defend myself against something I hadn't seen. So I did what any rational person would do. I started gathering my own evidence. Real evidence. I pulled my bank records going back 2 years. Every transaction, every deposit, every withdrawal. I pulled my credit card statements, my phone logs. I even requested security footage from my gym, my grocery store, and a few other places I went regularly, because I wanted timestamps proving where I actually was during the times he claimed I was out gambling. It took weeks. I barely slept. I was obsessing over every detail, building a case like I was preparing for trial. Because in a way, I was. This wasn't just about proving my innocence. This was about exposing whoever my brother had become. And then I started digging into his finances. I know that sounds invasive, but he'd just accused me of theft, so I didn't feel too bad about it. I had access to our late grandmother's estate documents because I was listed as a secondary executor. She'd passed away about 8 months earlier and left a decent amount of money to be split between the grandkids. My brother was the primary executor, which meant he handled most of the paperwork and distributions. I started going through the estate records, and that's when I found it. Withdrawals that didn't match up, transfers that were never documented, and a missing $10,000 that was supposed to have been distributed evenly, but somehow never made it to the rest of us. He'd stolen from our grandmother's estate, he'd taken the money, and when someone started asking questions, he'd pinned it on me. Then came the breaking point. I found his real bank statements. Not the ones he'd shown our parents, but his actual accounts. And they told a very different story. There were charges to online gambling sites, cash withdrawals at casinos, debt payments to sketchy payday loan companies. My brother had a gambling problem, a serious one, and he'd been funding it with money that wasn't his. I also found out he'd been lying about his job. He'd told everyone he got a promotion 6 months ago, that he was doing great, climbing the corporate ladder. Turns out he'd been fired over a year ago and had been freelancing under the table ever since, barely making rent. The promotion story was just another lie to keep up appearances. I had everything: bank records, screenshots, estate documents, employment records I got through a friend who works in HR at his old company. I had enough evidence to bury him, and honestly, I was ready to. I called a family meeting, told my parents it was urgent and that I needed everyone there. My brother tried to refuse, said he didn't want to be in the same room as me, but my dad insisted. So we all gathered at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon, and the tension was suffocating. My brother sat across from me with this smug look on his face, like he'd already won. My parents looked uncomfortable. My sister wouldn't even make eye contact with me. I set my laptop on the coffee table and started talking. I walked them through everything, showed them my real bank statements, explained that I don't gamble, never have, and that every dollar I've spent in the last 2 years is accounted for. I showed them security footage of me at the gym during times he claimed I was at a casino 3 hours away. I showed them text messages, phone logs, everything. And then I showed them the estate documents, the missing $10,000, the transfers he'd made to his own account, the falsified distribution records. I watched my parents' faces go from confused to horrified. My brother tried to interrupt, tried to say I'd fabricated everything, but I wasn't done. I pulled up his real bank statements, the gambling sites, the payday loans, the debt collectors. I showed them the termination letter from his job, dated 14 months ago, proving he'd been lying about his promotion. His face went white. He started stammering, trying to come up with an explanation, but there was nothing he could say. The evidence was overwhelming. I'd basically just dismantled his entire life in front of our family, and honestly, it felt like the only fair outcome. My mom started crying again. My dad just sat there, staring at my brother like he didn't recognize him. My sister finally looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. She'd believed him without question. They all had. My brother broke down, started begging, said he was sorry, that he had a problem, that he didn't know what else to do. He admitted he'd stolen from the estate, admitted he'd lied about his job, admitted he'd made up the whole story about me to cover his tracks because he knew the family would eventually start asking questions about the missing money. He said he thought if he could just pin it on me, buy himself some time, he'd be able to win the money back and fix everything before anyone noticed. Except he didn't win it back. He just kept losing, and the lie kept growing until he couldn't control it anymore. My dad asked him to leave, just told him to get out of the house. My brother tried to apologize again, tried to explain himself, but my dad wasn't having it. He pointed to the door and said leave. So he did, and I haven't spoken to him since. My parents apologized to me, said they should have listened, should have asked for my side before cutting me off. My sister apologized too, said she felt awful for believing him so easily, and I accepted their apologies because they're my family, and I love them. But it didn't erase the damage. For weeks, I'd been completely isolated, cut off from everyone I cared about, accused of something I didn't do. And even though they believe me now, even though they know the truth, I can't forget how quickly they turned on me, how little faith they had. My brother is estranged from the family now. My parents won't talk to him. He's apparently in some kind of rehab program for gambling addiction, but I don't really keep up with it. He sent me a letter a few months ago, a long apology trying to explain himself, asking if we could ever repair things. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I will, but right now, I'm not there yet. The whole thing taught me that even family can betray you, that the people you trust most can turn on you if the lie is convincing enough, and that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to have receipts for everything, because without that evidence, I'd still be the black sheep. I'd still be the liar, and he'd still be getting away with it. I got my apology, I got my reputation back, but the trust, that's gone, and I don't know if it'll ever come back. Lies within families can tear people apart, but what about when the lies come from someone who's supposed to have your back at work? I work in data analytics for a mid-sized tech company, and up until about 8 months ago, I thought I had a pretty solid relationship with my coworkers. We weren't best friends or anything, but we collaborated well, shared ideas, helped each other out when deadlines got tight. There was this one coworker, Jessica, who I'd worked with on a few projects. She seemed nice enough. We'd grab coffee sometimes, complain about management, the usual office small talk. Then things started to shift. Subtle at first, she'd make little comments in meetings, like, oh, I thought we discussed this already, or I feel like I've seen this approach before, always with this tone that suggested I wasn't bringing anything new to the table. I brushed it off. Office politics, right? People get competitive. But then the rumors started. I started hearing through the grapevine that Jessica was telling people I'd been taking credit for her work, that I was riding her coattails, that she'd done all the heavy lifting on our shared projects, and I'd just slapped my name on the final reports. It was complete nonsense, but the rumors spread fast. Suddenly, people were looking at me differently in meetings, questioning my contributions, asking for more detailed breakdowns of my process, like they didn't trust me anymore. I confronted her about it directly, asked her if she had a problem with me, if there was something we needed to clear up. She acted shocked, said she had no idea what I was talking about, told me people were probably just jealous of my success and making things up. She even offered to help me figure out who was spreading the rumors. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then I got called into HR. My manager was there, the HR director, and Jessica. She had a folder full of printed emails, report drafts, and project timelines. She told them I'd been plagiarizing her work for months, that she had proof. She laid out this whole story about how she'd been mentoring me, sharing her analysis techniques, and I'd been stealing her reports, changing a few words, and submitting them as my own. The emails she showed them looked damning. There were message threads where it looked like she'd sent me drafts, and I'd sent back nearly identical versions with my name on them. There were timestamps showing her files were created before mine. She even had a tearful moment where she talked about how hard it was to come forward, how she didn't want to ruin my career, but she couldn't let it continue. I sat there, completely blindsided. My manager looked disappointed. The HR director looked like she was already drafting my termination paperwork, and Jessica sat there with this perfectly crafted expression of reluctant concern, like she was so sad to have to do this. They asked if I had anything to say. I did. I told them I needed 24 hours to gather my own evidence, and that if they were going to fire me, they should at least let me defend myself properly. The HR director agreed, but I could tell she thought it was pointless. I left that meeting feeling like my career was over. But here's the thing, I'm a data analyst. I work with files, metadata, timestamps, and version histories every single day. If there's one thing I know how to do, it's trace the origin of a document. I went straight to my desk, pulled up our shared drive, and started digging. Every file we'd worked on together, every report, every analysis, I pulled the metadata. Creation dates, modification dates, author information, edit logs, all of it. And what I found was beautiful. Every single document she claimed I'd stolen from her, I had created first, weeks before her versions. The timestamps didn't lie. I'd made the original files, built the models, written the analysis. She'd copied them, made minor edits, and then changed the file properties to make it look like hers were earlier. But that wasn't even the worst part. The metadata also showed she'd been systematically editing the dates on her copied files to backdate them. She'd go into the file properties and manually change the creation timestamps to make it look like she'd done the work first. Except she didn't know that the system keeps a hidden edit log. Every time you modify file properties, it gets recorded. And I had access to those logs. I spent the entire night building a presentation, screenshots of the original metadata, side-by-side comparisons of creation dates versus modified dates, edit logs showing exactly when she'd changed the timestamps, email receipts showing when I'd submitted my work to our manager, weeks before she claimed to have even started. I even pulled chat logs from our project management software, showing me discussing the analysis methods she claimed to have taught me, back when she wasn't even assigned to those projects yet. By the time I walked into that HR meeting the next day, I had a 40-page document with irrefutable proof that she'd fabricated everything. I didn't even let them start the meeting. I opened my laptop, pulled up the presentation, and walked them through it. Every single piece of evidence, every timestamp, every edit log, every email receipt. I showed them exactly how she'd manipulated the file dates. I showed them the original creation data. I showed them everything. The room went silent. My manager's face went from disappointed to furious in about 10 seconds. The HR director stopped typing and just stared at the screen. And Jessica, she went pale, like all the color just drained out of her face. The HR director asked her if she had an explanation. Jessica tried to stutter something about maybe the system made a mistake, maybe the timestamps were wrong, maybe there was a glitch. I pulled up the edit logs again and showed them the exact moments she'd manually changed the dates. There was no glitch, there was no mistake. She'd done this deliberately. Then came the breaking point. The HR director asked if there was anything else I wanted to add. I did. I told them to check her recent file activity, because if she'd done this to me, she might have done it to other people. They pulled her access logs right there in the meeting. Turns out she'd been copying files from 3 other analysts on our team. Same pattern, same manipulated timestamps, same fake evidence ready to go if she needed to throw someone else under the bus. She'd been building an arsenal of plagiarism accusations, ready to deploy whenever it suited her. And the reason she came after me first was because I was up for a promotion, a senior analyst role that she wanted. She figured if she could get me fired, she'd be next in line. Jessica was terminated immediately, not just fired. Escorted out of the building by security, all her access revoked, the whole thing. HR told me later that they were considering legal action for falsifying company records and malicious conduct. I don't know if they followed through, but honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was that within a week, word got out. Our industry is small, people talk, and when someone gets fired for trying to frame a coworker with fake evidence, that story spreads fast. She's effectively blacklisted now. I've seen her name pop up on applicant lists for other companies in our network, and every time someone sends a quiet email asking if anyone's worked with her before, the answer is always the same: hard pass. I got the promotion, partly because I earned it, but also because my manager felt horrible about almost believing her. He apologized profusely, said he should have questioned the evidence more carefully, and made sure everyone on the team knew what had really happened. My reputation got cleared, hers got destroyed. The whole thing still makes me angry when I think about it. Not just because she tried to ruin my career, but because of how calculated it was. She didn't do this in a moment of panic or desperation. She planned it, spent weeks, maybe months, setting it up, copying files, manipulating data, building fake evidence, all so she could destroy someone and climb over their wreckage. The scariest part is how close it came to working. If I didn't know how to check metadata, if I wasn't a data analyst who understood file systems, I would have been fired. My career would have been over, and she would have gotten exactly what she wanted. I don't trust people at work the same way anymore. I keep backups of everything. I document every conversation. I save every email, because I learned that sometimes the person smiling at you over coffee is the same person building a case to destroy you behind your back. Jessica thought she was smarter than me, thought she could manipulate the system and get away with it. But she forgot one crucial detail. I'm the one who works with data every single day. I know how to find the truth in the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. She's gone now, blacklisted, unhireable, and I'm still here, doing the work I love, with a promotion and a team that actually has my back. The best part is knowing that her own arrogance destroyed her. She handed me every piece of evidence I needed to bury her, wrapped up in a neat little folder, thinking I wouldn't know how to fight back. Turns out the metadata was the murder weapon, and she left her fingerprints all over it. Corporate backstabbing is brutal, but it's nothing compared to what happens when someone you love has been playing you from the start. I want to start by saying that I never thought this would happen to me. You hear these stories all the time, right? Partner acting shady, someone finds out they're cheating, drama ensues. I always thought I was smarter than that I'd see the signs, that I'd know. Turns out I didn't know anything. My partner and I had been together for 5 years. 5 years of building a life, talking about the future, planning trips we'd take when we retired. We weren't married yet, but we'd talked about it. We lived together. We had a dog. We were that couple that people pointed to and said, yeah, those two have it figured out. And then things started to feel off. It was small at first. They started working late more often. Like, a lot more often. 2-3 nights a week, they'd text me saying they had to stay at the office for a project. Then it became 4 nights, then 5. I'd ask about it, and they'd give me these vague answers about deadlines and demanding clients. I believed them because why wouldn't I? They'd never given me a reason not to trust them. Then came the phone calls. They'd step outside to take them, or go into another room, or suddenly their phone would be on silent all the time. If I asked who called, it was always work. Always some colleague with a question or some emergency that needed handling right that second. The excuses started piling up. Weekend work trips, mandatory training sessions, team building events I wasn't invited to. I started to feel like I was living with a stranger who just happened to share my address. I tried talking to them about it, asked if everything was okay, if we were okay. They'd reassure me, tell me work was just stressful, that things would calm down soon. They'd kiss me on the forehead and promise we'd do something special once their project wrapped up. So I waited, and I believed them. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You give them the benefit of the doubt. But that wasn't even the worst part. One Saturday, they forgot their gym bag at home. They'd already left for what they said was a quick workout, and I noticed it sitting by the door. I figured I'd be helpful and bring it to them. Maybe surprise them with coffee after. I picked it up and it felt heavier than usual. I unzipped it to see if they'd packed weights or something, and that's when I saw it. A phone. A second phone. Tucked into the inside pocket, wrapped in a small towel like they were trying to hide it. My brain did this weird thing where it tried to rationalize it immediately. Maybe it's a work phone. Maybe it's an old phone they're selling. Maybe it's literally anything other than what my gut was screaming at me it was. I pulled it out. The screen was locked, but it still had some charge. I took it inside, sat down on the couch, and just stared at it for a minute. My hands were shaking. I knew that if I turned this phone on, if I looked at what was on it, there was no going back. Whatever I found would change everything. I plugged it in and waited for it to charge enough to turn on. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. The dog was sitting next to me, looking at me like he knew something was wrong. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that there'd be some perfectly reasonable explanation. The phone finally powered on. No password, no Face ID. It opened right up, and there in the Messages app was a thread with someone named Alex. Months of messages, hundreds of them. I started scrolling, and with every message, my stomach dropped further. They weren't just texting, they were planning. Weekend getaways to places I'd never heard them mention. Intimate details about things they'd done together. Inside jokes, pet names, conversations about a future they were building that had nothing to do with me. There were messages from 3 days ago, from last week, from 2 months back. This wasn't some one-time mistake. This was ongoing, deliberate, calculated. I found messages where Alex asked when they were finally going to leave me, where they talked about moving in together, about starting fresh. My partner kept saying soon, just a little longer. They needed to figure out logistics. Didn't want to hurt me, didn't want to hurt me. Like that ship hadn't already sailed and crashed into a reef. I sat there on my couch, reading through a year's worth of lies, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought we had, was just gone, erased, replaced by this secret life they'd been living behind my back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. I wanted to call them right then and lose it. But I didn't. Instead, I took screenshots, every message, every photo, every plan they'd made. I backed it all up to my cloud, emailed it to myself, and saved it in 3 different places. Then I called a lawyer. I know that sounds cold. I know people probably think I should have confronted them first, tried to work it out, gone to therapy. But here's the thing. I didn't want to work it out. I didn't want to sit across from someone who'd been lying to my face for a year and hear their excuses. I wanted out, and I wanted to protect myself while doing it. The lawyer told me to document everything, keep the phone, don't let on that I knew until we had a plan in place. So that's what I did. I put the phone back in the gym bag like nothing happened. I went about my day. When my partner came home from the gym, I smiled and asked how their workout was. They said it was great, kissed me, told me they loved me. I felt nothing. I waited 3 days. 3 days of pretending everything was fine, while my lawyer drew up paperwork and made sure I was covered. 3 days of watching them text on their regular phone and wondering if they were talking to Alex on the other one when I wasn't looking. And here's where it gets absurd. On day 4, I walked into the living room where they were watching TV, and I just put the backup phone on the coffee table in front of them. Didn't say anything, just placed it there and waited. The look on their face was something I'll never forget. Pure panic. They picked up the phone, looked at it, looked at me, and I watched the color drain from their face. They tried to deny it at first, said it wasn't what I thought, that I was overreacting, that I'd misunderstood. So I pulled out my own phone and started reading messages out loud, word for word, with dates and timestamps. That's when they broke. They started crying, admitted everything, said it had been going on for a year, that they'd met Alex at a work conference and it just happened, that they never meant for it to go this far, that they still loved me, that they wanted to fix this. I asked them one question. Did Alex know about me? They went quiet, looked at the floor, and then, barely audible, said no. Alex didn't know. They'd told Alex they were single, that they lived alone, that there was no one else. So not only had they been lying to me for a year, they'd been lying to Alex too. They'd built this entire fake narrative where they were this available, unattached person just waiting for the right relationship. And Alex had believed it, just like I'd believed all their excuses. I told them to pack a bag and leave. They tried to argue, said we should talk, that we could go to counseling, that it was just a mistake. I told them the only mistake was me trusting them, and that conversation was over. They left that night, stayed with a friend. I changed the locks the next day. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. They tried to drag it out, wanted to negotiate, kept sending me messages about how sorry they were. I ignored all of it. My lawyer handled everything. We split assets, divided belongings, and I kept the dog because there was no way I was giving that up. The absolute kicker in all of this, I reached out to Alex, found them on social media using details from the messages. I sent them a message explaining who I was, that my partner had been lying to both of us, and that they deserved to know the truth. Alex was devastated, had no idea, thought they'd found someone real, someone honest. We ended up talking for a bit, comparing notes, realizing just how deep the lies went. My partner had been playing both of us, telling each of us what we wanted to hear, building two separate lives and somehow managing to keep them from colliding, until they didn't. Alex ended things immediately, blocked my ex on everything. We're not friends or anything, but there was something oddly cathartic about both of us, realizing we'd been played by the same person. I'm still processing it all, honestly. Some days I'm angry, some days I'm just tired. I don't miss them, which surprised me at first. I thought I would, but I think what I actually miss is the idea of them. The person I thought they were. That person never existed. I've moved on. New apartment, new routines. The dog's doing great, by the way, thriving even. I've started dating again, which feels weird, but I'm taking it slow. Learning to trust my gut more, paying attention to red flags I used to brush off, and I don't ignore my instincts anymore. If something feels off, it probably is. I wasted a year of my life doubting myself, convincing myself I was being paranoid, when really I was just seeing the truth and refusing to accept it. So yeah, I thought my partner was loyal. Turns out their backup phone had other ideas. And honestly, I'm glad I found it. Because living a lie, even a comfortable one, is worse than facing a hard truth. Betrayal from a partner stings, but sometimes the knife comes from the people who raised you. My dad passed away unexpectedly last year. Heart attack. He was only 63. It happened so fast that none of us were prepared. Not emotionally, not practically, not in any way. One day he was fine, complaining about his golf swing, and the next day he was gone. My mom asked me to help clean out his stuff. She couldn't do it herself. Too painful. So I took a week off work and started going through everything. Clothes, books, old tax documents, the usual things you find when someone dies. Most of it was boring, depressing, but boring. Then I went up to the attic. My dad used to spend a lot of time up there. He called it his office, but really it was just a place he'd go to get away from everyone. I hadn't been up there in years. It smelled like dust and old paper. There were boxes everywhere, stacked haphazardly, most of them labeled in his handwriting. Christmas decorations, old electronics, sports equipment. And then I found a box that wasn't labeled. It was shoved in the back corner under a tarp, like someone had tried to hide it. It had a padlock on it, an actual padlock. I'd never seen my dad lock anything in his life. The man left his car unlocked in parking lots. So why was this box different? I looked around for a key, checked his desk drawers, his toolbox, anywhere it might be. Nothing. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I grabbed a hammer and broke the lock. Inside was a photo album, one of those old-fashioned leather-bound ones with the thick pages. I opened it expecting maybe old photos of my mum or pictures from before I was born. Instead, I found my dad, with a completely different family. There was a woman, blonde, smiling, holding his hand. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, both younger than me. And my dad, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. They were at birthday parties, Christmas mornings, beach vacations. There were dozens of photos, maybe 100, all of them showing a life I didn't know existed. I sat there on the attic floor, flipping through the pages, trying to make sense of it. Was this before he met my mum? Some previous relationship he never talked about? But the dates on the photos didn't match. Some of them were from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 15. This wasn't the past. This was happening while I was growing up, while my mum was married to him. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My dad, the guy who coached my little league team and taught me how to ride a bike, had an entire second family. And I had no idea. I took the album downstairs, showed my mom, watched her face go from confusion to shock to something I can't even describe. She didn't cry. She just stared at the photos, turning pages slowly, like she was looking at evidence of a crime, which I guess she was. She asked me if I thought it was real, if maybe it was some kind of mistake. I didn't know what to say, so I told her I'd figure it out. I started digging, reverse image searched some of the photos, found a Facebook profile for the woman. Her name was Linda. She lived in Ohio. We're in California, 3 states away, just like my dad used to travel for work. He told us he was a regional sales manager, told us he had to visit clients all over the West Coast. Turns out he wasn't visiting clients. He was visiting his other wife. I found obituaries. My dad's name listed as survived by Linda, his loving wife of 22 years. Survived by his children, Michael and Sarah. No mention of me, no mention of my mom. It was like we didn't exist. I didn't know what to do with that information. Part of me wanted to just pretend I never found it. Bury the album, forget it existed, let my mom grieve in peace. But I couldn't, because somewhere out there, this woman and these kids had no idea about us either, and they deserved to know the truth. So I contacted Linda, sent her a message on Facebook, kept it simple, said I was my dad's son, and that I'd found some photos, asked if we could talk. She responded within an hour, said she'd love to hear from family. She had no idea what was coming. We set up a phone call. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't want to put her through it if it turned out to be nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Linda answered and she sounded kind, warm. She said she was so glad to hear from me, that my dad had talked about me. Except he hadn't. He told her he had a son from a previous marriage who he wasn't close with, that I lived across the country and we didn't speak. That was the story. I was the estranged kid he never saw. I didn't correct her right away. I asked her about my dad, about their life together, and she told me everything, how they met 23 years ago at a conference, how he proposed 6 months later, how he traveled for work, 2 weeks home, 2 weeks away, like clockwork, how he'd just bought them a new house, how the kids were doing in school. She had no idea. None. She thought she was his only wife, his only family. Then came the breaking point. I told her the truth, that my dad had been married to my mom for 35 years, that I grew up with him, that he didn't live across the country, he lived with us, that he died in our house, with us. She went silent. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, but she didn't say anything for a long time. Then she asked me if I was lying, if this was some kind of sick joke. I told her I'd send her proof, photos, documents, whatever she needed. She hung up. I thought that was it, that she'd block me and I'd never hear from her again. But 2 days later, she called back. She'd done her own digging, found our address, found my mom's social media, found photos of my dad at my high school graduation, at family dinners, at our house. She said she felt like her entire life was a lie. And honestly, I got it, because I felt the same way. We decided to meet, all of us, me, my mom, Linda, and the kids, Michael and Sarah. It felt surreal, like something out of a bad movie, but we needed answers. We needed to understand how he pulled this off. We met at a neutral location, a park halfway between our cities. It was awkward. No one knew what to say at first. Linda looked at my mum like she was seeing a ghost. My mum looked at Linda the same way. Michael and Sarah, my half-siblings, just looked confused. They were younger, early 20s, and they didn't understand why their dad's other son had suddenly appeared. We sat down and started comparing notes, dates, stories, timelines. And slowly the full picture came together. My dad had been living 2 completely separate lives for over 20 years. He told Linda he was a traveling salesman, told my mum the same thing. 2 weeks with us, 2 weeks with them. He had 2 phones, 2 sets of friends, 2 everything. He'd been to Michael's college graduation the same year he'd been to mine, just on opposite sides of the country. The logistics alone were insane. How did he keep it straight? How did he not slip up? Linda said he was meticulous, kept calendars, planned everything down to the minute. My mum said the same thing. He was organized to a fault. Linda asked if my mum knew. My mum asked if Linda knew. Neither of them did. We were all in the dark, and the worst part was he'd gotten away with it. He died before anyone found out. If I hadn't found that photo album, we'd still have no idea. Michael asked why. Why would he do this? And none of us had an answer. My dad wasn't a bad person, or at least I didn't think he was. He was present, involved, he showed up. But apparently he showed up for two families, and I don't know how to reconcile that. Linda was devastated. She said she felt like the last 20 years of her life were built on a lie. My mum said the same thing, and honestly, so did I. Because the dad I thought I knew, the one who taught me how to change a tire and sat through my terrible school plays, he wasn't real. He was a character, a role he played 2 weeks at a time. We talked for hours, shared stories, realized we had weirdly similar memories. Turns out he told the same jokes to both families, used the same excuses, even bought us similar birthday gifts. It was like he had a script. Michael and Sarah were angry, at him, at the situation, at us for even existing. I got it. I was angry too, but Linda, she was just heartbroken. She kept saying she should have known, that there were signs, but how could she have known? He was good, too good. My mum didn't say much. She just listened, took it all in, processed. I think she was still in shock. We've stayed in touch, not close, but we talk. It's strange having half-siblings you didn't know existed. Strange knowing your dad had an entire other life. But we're trying to piece together the truth, trying to understand who he really was. The thing is, I don't think we'll ever fully know. He took his secrets with him. All we have are fragments, photos, stories, lies that we're still untangling. My mom's still processing it. Some days she's angry, some days she's just sad. Linda's the same. They've talked a few times, bonded over the betrayal. It's weird, but I think it's helped both of them. As for me, I don't know how to feel. I loved my dad, but I also hate what he did, and I don't know how to hold both of those things at the same time. We're still figuring it out, all of us, but at least now we know the truth, and maybe that's enough. Discovering a parent's secret identity is traumatic, but what if your own identity was being stolen right under your nose? I'm going to be honest, when this whole thing started, I thought I was losing my mind. It began with random messages from people I'd never met. Strangers on social media sending me congratulations for a new job I didn't have. Asking how my girlfriend was doing when I was very much single. Commenting on posts about trips I'd never taken and restaurants I'd never been to. At first, I thought it was a case of mistaken identity. Maybe there was another person with my name out there, living their best life, and people were just mixing us up. So I'd politely correct them, say they had the wrong person and move on. But it kept happening, more and more frequently, and the details were too specific to be coincidence. People were mentioning things only someone close to me would know. My college major, the city I grew up in, my dog's name, things that weren't just public knowledge. I started asking these people where they knew me from, and they'd send me links to profiles, social media accounts with my name, my photos, my face. Except I hadn't created any of those accounts. I clicked through them and my stomach just dropped. There were Instagram profiles, Facebook pages, even a LinkedIn account, all using my name and pictures I'd posted on my private accounts. Whoever made these had gone through my real profiles, downloaded my photos, and built an entire fake life around them. The fake me had a girlfriend, a job at a marketing firm I'd never worked for, posts about weekend getaways and fancy dinners. There were even comments from people I didn't recognize, saying things like, "So glad we finally met in person," or "Thanks for the advice on that project." It was like watching someone else wear my face and live a completely different life. I was freaking out. I immediately started reporting the accounts, flagging them as impersonation, going through every platform's process for identity theft. But these things take time, days, sometimes weeks, and in the meantime, whoever was doing this was still out there, pretending to be me. I tried to figure out who it could be. An ex, someone from work, a random internet creep. I couldn't think of anyone who'd have both access to my photos and enough details about my life to make it convincing. I changed all my passwords, made my real accounts private, and started monitoring everything obsessively. Then one night I was home with my roommate, just hanging out, when there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I figured it was a delivery or maybe a neighbor. I opened the door and there was this girl standing there looking nervous, holding flowers. She smiled at me and said, "Hey, I know this is a surprise, but I wanted to finally meet you in person. We've been talking for weeks. I had no idea who she was. I must have looked confused because her smile faltered. She said my name, my actual full name, and asked if I was me. I said yes, but I had no idea who she was or what she was talking about. She pulled out her phone and showed me a conversation thread. Messages between her and someone claiming to be me. Flirty texts, plans to meet up, photos I recognized from my own camera roll. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I told her I'd never sent those messages, that someone was using my identity. She looked devastated, said she'd been talking to this person for over a month, that they'd told her about their job, their life, even sent her voice messages. Voice messages that apparently sounded like me because she'd heard me speak just now and it matched. That's when it clicked. My roommate. My roommate had access to everything, my photos, my voice, my personal details. He lived with me. He'd seen me on video calls, heard me talk, knew my routines, and he had the technical skills to pull something like this off. I asked the girl to wait, told her I needed to check something. I went to my roommate's room, knocked, and when he didn't answer, I opened the door. He wasn't there, but his laptop was open on his desk, and right there on the screen was a fake profile. My face, my name, an active chat window with someone asking when we were going to meet up. I took a photo of the screen with my phone, then I went through his browser history. Multiple fake accounts, all using my identity. Some were for dating, some were for job applications, and some, the ones that made me want to throw up, were scam messages asking people for money. Small amounts, $50 here, 100 there. Enough to not raise too many red flags, but enough to add up. This is where patience finally snapped. I went back to the girl at the door and showed her the photo of my roommate's laptop. Explained that the person she'd been talking to wasn't me. It was him. She started crying, said she felt so stupid. I told her it wasn't her fault, that he'd been doing this to multiple people, and that I was going to handle it. She left, and I sat in the living room, waiting for my roommate to come home. When he finally walked in around midnight, I was still sitting there in the dark. I turned on the light and he jumped. I asked him point blank, "Why are you pretending to be me online?" He tried to deny it at first, said I was being paranoid, that I'd misunderstood something, so I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo of his laptop screen, showed him the messages I'd screenshot, showed him everything. He just deflated, sat down on the couch and put his head in his hands. And then he said the most pathetic thing I've ever heard. "Your life just looked better than mine." He admitted he'd been doing it for months, said he was lonely, unemployed, and miserable, and creating these fake profiles made him feel like he was someone important, someone people wanted to talk to. He said he never thought it would hurt anyone, that it was just online, just pretend. I told him it wasn't pretend to the people he scammed, it wasn't pretend to the women he catfished, and it sure as hell wasn't pretend to me, whose entire reputation was now tied to his lies. He started crying, begging me not to call the police, said he'd delete everything, that he'd make it right, but I was done. I'd already screenshot everything I needed. I had proof. And I wasn't going to let this slide. I filed a police report the next day. Identity theft, fraud, impersonation, the whole thing. I contacted every platform he'd created accounts on, sent them evidence and requested immediate removal. Most of them took the accounts down within 48 hours once I provided proof it was fraud. But that wasn't even the worst part. While I was cleaning up his mess, I found out he'd applied for jobs using my name, actual companies. He'd sent resumes with my credentials, my work history, and his own embellishments. Some of those applications were still active. I had to contact HR departments at companies I'd never applied to and explain that someone had committed fraud using my identity. One company had actually scheduled an interview. They were confused when I told them I'd never applied. They forwarded me the application, and it had details only my roommate would know. References from jobs I'd actually worked. Contact information that led back to a phone number he'd set up. He'd built an entire fake professional life under my name. I also found out he'd been scamming people on social media, asking for money for fake emergencies, a sick relative, a car repair, small amounts from different people so no one would compare notes. He'd made hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars pretending to be me. The police took it seriously, especially once I showed them the financial side. Fraud involving money gets attention real fast. They seized his laptop, his phone, went through everything. He was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and a few other things I don't fully understand, but my lawyer explained were serious. He got evicted from our apartment within 2 weeks. The landlord didn't want the liability. He also lost his part-time job once they found out he was under investigation for fraud. Last I heard, he's facing actual legal consequences, fines, possible jail time, and a record that's going to follow him for the rest of his life. I've spent the last few months trying to rebuild my online reputation, contacting people who interacted with the fake accounts, explaining what happened. Some people were understanding, others thought I was lying and trying to cover up my own bad behavior. I've had to prove over and over that I'm the real me and that the other accounts were fake. It's exhausting and humiliating and infuriating because none of this was my fault, but I'm the one who has to fix it. I still get messages sometimes. People asking if I'm the real version or the fake one. Companies reaching out about applications I never submitted. Women asking why I ghosted them when I never talked to them in the first place. My roommate destroyed my sense of security. I can't post anything online anymore without wondering if someone's going to steal it. I check my name on search engines weekly to make sure no new fake profiles pop up. I've locked down every account I have, made everything private, and I still feel like I'm waiting for the next shoe to drop. The worst part is, he genuinely thought it was harmless. That because it was online, it didn't matter. But it did matter. It mattered to the people he scammed. It mattered to the women he lied to. And it mattered to me, whose entire identity got hijacked by someone I trusted enough to live with. So yeah, my roommate pretended to be me online, and I ruined his fake identity. And honestly, I don't feel bad about it. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Identity theft is one thing, but being falsely accused in public? That's a whole different level of violation. I've lived in my apartment complex for about 2 years. It's one of those places with an HOA, community meetings, shared amenities, the whole deal. I mostly kept to myself, went to work, came home, didn't cause problems. I had one assigned parking spot that happened to be really close to the main entrance, which was nice during winter, but otherwise not something I thought much about. My neighbor, this guy named Derek, who lived 2 units down, had been there for like 8 years. He was one of those people who acted like he owned the place because he'd been around longer than most residents. Always had an opinion about everything. Always volunteering for the HOA board, but never actually getting elected because people found him exhausting. We'd had maybe 3 conversations total in 2 years. Small talk, weather, nothing substantial. I had no idea he had any problem with me until the community meeting. It was a standard monthly meeting. Maybe 20 people showed up. They were discussing landscaping updates and pool rules when Derek stood up during the open forum section and just went off. He said he needed to bring attention to a serious issue affecting the community. Then he pointed directly at me. He accused me of vandalizing his car, said I'd keyed it 2 weeks prior, left a huge scratch down the side. He accused me of stealing his packages, claimed I'd taken 3 deliveries meant for him over the past month. And then, this is where it got completely unhinged, he said I'd been harassing his family, following his wife, making threatening gestures at his kids, creating a hostile environment. I sat there, completely frozen, while he painted me as this dangerous criminal who'd been terrorizing him for months. He was loud, he was emotional, he had the whole room's attention, and he had absolutely zero proof. When he finished, the HOA president asked if I wanted to respond. I said none of it was true, that I'd never touched his car, never taken his packages, never even spoken to his wife or seen his kids. I said he was lying and I had no idea why. Derek demanded I be evicted immediately. Said he and his family didn't feel safe with me living there. A few other residents started murmuring in agreement. People I'd smiled at in the hallway, who I thought were perfectly friendly, suddenly looking at me like I was a threat. The HOA said they'd investigate, but I could tell from their faces they were already leaning toward believing him. He'd been there longer. He was more involved in the community. I was just some quiet person who kept to themselves, which apparently made me suspicious. I left that meeting humiliated. People were staring, whispering. I went home, locked my door, and just sat there trying to process what had just happened. I'd been publicly accused of crimes I didn't commit, and everyone believed him. For the next few days, it got worse. People avoided me in the parking lot. I got dirty looks at the mailbox. Someone left a note on my door saying I should move out before things escalated. I felt completely ostracized in a place I paid rent to live in. Then I remembered something. Derek has cameras, like a lot of cameras. His unit is covered in security equipment. He's got cameras on his door, cameras pointing at his car, cameras covering his entire parking area. He's one of those people obsessed with surveillance, always talking about how important it is to protect your property. If he was accusing me of vandalizing his car and stealing his packages, his own cameras would have caught it, or they'd show it wasn't me. Either way, the footage would tell the truth. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA, laid out every accusation he'd made, and requested that they obtain his security footage to verify his claims. I said if I was on camera doing any of what he accused me of, I'd move out immediately. But if I wasn't, I wanted a public apology and consequences for him making false accusations. The HOA contacted Derek and requested the footage. He refused, said it was his private property and he didn't have to share it. The HOA reminded him that he'd made formal accusations at an official meeting and that they had the authority to request evidence as part of their investigation. He kept refusing, which honestly just made him look more suspicious. They threatened him with fines for non-compliance. He finally, reluctantly, handed over selected clips. The HOA reviewed them and told me they needed to see more. They could tell the timestamps had gaps. Derek fought them every step of the way. But eventually they forced him to provide full footage for the dates he'd cited in his accusations. This is where patience finally snapped. The footage showed everything, and I mean everything. 2 weeks before the meeting, Derek went out to his own car with his keys in hand and deliberately scratched a long line down the side. Just dragged his key across the paint in broad daylight on his own camera. Then he went inside. The package theft was even better. His cameras caught delivery drivers dropping off boxes at his door. Then, hours later, Derek himself would come out, pick up his own packages, and take them to his car. He'd hide them in his trunk. Later that night, he'd go online and report them as stolen. There was no footage of me anywhere near his car. No footage of me taking packages. No footage of me following his wife or making gestures at his kids, because none of that ever happened. But there was footage of him, standing outside my door when I wasn't home, taking photos of my parking spot, measuring the distance from the entrance, talking to another neighbor and gesturing angrily toward my unit. The HOA called an emergency meeting. They presented the footage to the board and to Derek. I was invited to attend. Derek tried to claim the footage was edited, that it was taken out of context, that I'd somehow manipulated his own security system, which made absolutely no sense. The board wasn't buying it. They asked him point blank why he'd vandalized his own car, why he'd hidden his own packages, why he'd made up accusations against someone who'd never interacted with him. And that's when everything unraveled. He broke down, started yelling about how it wasn't fair that I had the good parking spot when I'd only been there 2 years. He'd been there 8 years and had to park farther away. He said he'd requested a spot change multiple times and been denied. He thought if he could get me evicted, my spot would open up and he'd finally be able to claim it. So he'd fabricated an entire campaign of harassment and vandalism against himself, blamed me for it, and tried to turn the community against me, all for a parking spot that was maybe 30 feet closer to the door than his. The audacity is actually kind of impressive when you think about it. The HOA fined him immediately. Violation of community conduct rules, filing false complaints, harassing another resident. The fines added up to thousands of dollars. Then they voted to terminate his lease, gave him 60 days to move out. He tried to fight it, threatened to sue, said they were discriminating against him, but his own security footage was irrefutable evidence. He'd recorded himself committing fraud, vandalism to his own property, and filing false reports. There was no defense. The HOA issued a public apology to me at the next community meeting, read it out loud in front of everyone who'd been at the previous meeting, explained that the accusations had been thoroughly investigated and proven false, that Derek had fabricated everything and was being evicted as a result. People started approaching me to apologize. Residents who'd avoided me suddenly wanted to make nice. I accepted their apologies, But I didn't forget how quick they were to believe I was guilty without a shred of evidence. Derek moved out 5 weeks later. I watched from my window as he loaded boxes into a moving truck, parked in the spot he'd wanted so badly. He never looked up, never tried to apologize, just left. I still live here, still have the same parking spot, and every time I pull into it, I think about how someone tried to destroy my reputation, get me evicted, and turn an entire community against me, all because they wanted to park a little closer to the building. The whole thing taught me that some people will go to insane lengths for the pettiest reasons, and that sometimes the best thing you can do is let people's own actions speak for themselves. Derek built his entire case on lies, but he also built a surveillance system that caught every single one. His cameras destroyed him, and honestly, I can't think of a more fitting ending. Public humiliation can destroy reputations, but so can one wrong screenshot sent to the wrong person. I got a text from my cousin's fiancée on a random Tuesday afternoon. We weren't close, like, we'd exchanged maybe 10 texts total in the 2 years they'd been together. So when her name popped up on my phone, I was already confused. I opened the message and it was a screenshot. Not meant for me, clearly. It was a text conversation between her and someone saved as Babe with a heart emoji. The messages were talking about my cousin, about how she was only marrying him because he had money, how she planned to stick it out for a year, maybe two, then divorce him and take half of everything. How she couldn't wait to be done with the whole charade. I stared at my phone, reading it over and over, trying to make sure I was seeing this right. And then, maybe 5 seconds later, another text came through. OMG, wrong person, delete that. Then another. Please, I'm begging you, delete it. Then a call. Then 3 more calls in a row. I didn't answer. I screenshot the screenshot, backed it up to my cloud, and then just sat there trying to figure out what to do. My cousin Jake is a good guy, like genuinely one of the best people I know. He's generous, kind, maybe a little too trusting. He'd been so excited about this wedding, talked about it constantly, showed me pictures of the venue, the cake, the flowers. He was all in. And now I had proof that the person he was about to marry was playing him. I called him, told him we needed to talk in person. He could tell something was wrong by my tone, so he came over that night. I showed him the screenshot without saying anything, just handed him my phone and watched his face. He stared at it for a long time. Then he handed the phone back and said it had to be fake, that there was no way she'd say that maybe it was photoshopped or taken out of context. He was in denial. I got it. Who wants to believe the person they're about to marry is scamming them? But I wasn't about to let him walk into this blind. So I told him we needed to dig deeper, figure out who this Babe person was, see if there was more to the story. He hesitated but eventually agreed. We started with her phone records. Jake had access to their shared cell phone account, so he pulled the logs. Turns out, there was one number she texted constantly, way more than she texted him, hundreds of messages a day. We cross-referenced the number with her social media, and that's when we found him. Her ex-boyfriend, the guy she'd dated before Jake, the guy she told Jake she'd completely cut off. Except she hadn't. They'd been talking the entire time she and Jake were together. We went through her Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. Found old posts she'd forgotten to delete. Pictures of her and the ex from 6 months ago, a year ago, tagged at restaurants, concerts, weekend trips, all while she was engaged to Jake. But that wasn't even the worst part. Jake had given her access to one of his bank accounts, a joint account they were going to use for wedding expenses. He'd deposited $50,000 into it, money he'd saved for years. When we logged in to check the balance, there was less than $8,000 left. She'd been draining it. Slowly. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Transfers to her personal account that she'd labeled as wedding expenses, except we checked and none of them matched up with any actual vendors. The florist hadn't been paid. The venue was still waiting on a deposit. The photographer had sent 3 invoices that were overdue. She'd taken over $40,000 and spent it on who knows what. Probably her and the ex, based on the timeline of withdrawals, matching up with her social media posts of fancy dinners and new clothes. Jake was devastated. He didn't want to believe it. Kept saying there had to be an explanation, that maybe she'd made a mistake, but the evidence was right there, undeniable. We found more. Emails between her and the ex talking about their future together, how they'd get married once she was done with Jake, how the money would set them up, how Jake was too naive to notice. They called him a sucker, laughed about how easy it was to manipulate him. Reading those emails, I wanted to throw my laptop across the room. This wasn't just betrayal, this was premeditated, calculated. She'd targeted him from the start. Jake finally snapped out of denial. He called her, told her to come over. She showed up thinking everything was fine, and he just laid it all out. Showed her the screenshots, the bank records, the emails, everything. She tried to deny it at first, said I'd hacked her accounts, that the screenshots were fake, that we were making it all up because I was jealous of their relationship. Jealous. Like I'd spent weeks fabricating evidence because I had nothing better to do. Jake didn't buy it. He told her the wedding was off, told her to pack her stuff and get out of his apartment. She started crying, begging, saying she could explain. But there was nothing to explain. The evidence spoke for itself. She left, but not quietly. She posted on social media that Jake had called off the wedding because I'd poisoned him against her, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I'd sabotaged their relationship because I was bitter and alone. Her friends started commenting, calling me horrible names, saying I'd ruined her life. The family group chat lit up. People asking what happened, why the wedding was off. My aunt Jake's mum was devastated. She'd already bought a dress, booked a flight, sent out invitations to all her friends. Jake told everyone the truth, showed them the evidence, and the narrative flipped fast. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain. I was the hero who'd saved Jake from a disastrous marriage. Family members started thanking me, saying I'd done the right thing, that Jake was lucky to have someone looking out for him. The ex-fiancée did not take this well. She started threatening legal action, sent me a message saying she was going to sue me for defamation, for invasion of privacy, for emotional distress. I forwarded the message to a lawyer friend who laughed and said she had no case. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation, and I hadn't invaded anything. She'd sent me the screenshot herself. Things went from bad to unhinged. She showed up at Jake's apartment at 2 a.m, banging on the door, screaming about how he owed her. How she'd wasted 2 years of her life on him. How he'd promised her a future, and now she had nothing. The neighbors called the cops. She got escorted off the property, and Jake filed for a restraining order. The ex-boyfriend, the babe from the screenshots, reached out to Jake, tried to apologize, said he didn't know she was still engaged, that she'd told him they'd broken up months ago. He seemed genuine, but honestly, I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Jake got most of his money back. Turned out she'd spent some of it, but a decent chunk was still in her account. His lawyer sent a demand letter threatening legal action if she didn't return it, and she caved, transferred back $32,000. The rest was gone, but at least he got something. The wedding venue, the vendors, everyone got notified. Some were understanding, others kept deposits. Jake lost a few thousand in cancellation fees, but compared to what he would have lost in a divorce, it was nothing. He's doing better now, still hurt, still processing. But he's relieved. He said he keeps thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't gotten that screenshot. If she'd gone through with the wedding, if he'd married her and only found out a year later when she filed for divorce. As for me, I'm apparently the family hero now, which is weird. I didn't do anything except show Jake the truth, but people keep thanking me at family events, saying I saved him. My aunt hugs me every time she sees me and calls me her guardian angel. The ex-fiancée is still out there somewhere, probably telling her version of the story, probably painting herself as the victim, but I don't care. The people who matter know the truth, and Jake dodged the biggest bullet of his life, all because she hit send on the wrong message. The audacity to accidentally expose your own scam and then try to blame someone else for it is almost impressive. Almost. Sometimes people really do hand you the rope. You just have to be willing to use it. Family drama can get messy, but what happens when the person sabotaging you isn't a stranger? It's your best friend. I used to think Sarah was my best friend. We met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions and terrible cafeteria food, and stayed close even after graduation. She was the person I called when something good happened, the person I vented to when life got hard. For years, I genuinely believed she had my back. Looking back now, I feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. It started small, little things I brushed off because they seemed like bad luck. I'd apply for a job I was perfect for, make it to the final round of interviews, and then suddenly get a rejection email with no explanation. It happened once, then twice, then 5 times. I started wondering if something was wrong with my resume, or if I was bombing interviews without realizing it. Then there were the dates. I'd meet someone, we'd hit it off, plans would be made, and then they'd ghost me. No explanation, no response to follow-up messages, just radio silence. It was frustrating, but I figured that's just how dating works sometimes. People change their minds. It happens. But the friendships were what really started to worry me. I'd make plans with people I'd known for years, and they'd cancel last minute. Or they'd stop responding to my texts altogether. Mutual friends would suddenly become distant, like they were avoiding me. I asked a few of them if I'd done something wrong, and they'd give me vague responses about needing space or being busy. It felt like I was slowly being frozen out of my own social circle, and I had no idea why. I started to think maybe something was wrong with me, that I was the problem, that I was doing or saying things that pushed people away without realizing it. I even went to therapy for a while trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. My therapist kept telling me I seemed fine, that sometimes people just drift apart, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. Then I got the email. A mutual friend, someone Sarah and I both knew from college, accidentally forwarded me an email chain. It was supposed to go to someone else, but my name was right next to theirs in his contacts, and he clicked the wrong one. Honest mistake. Except the email chain he sent me changed everything. It was a conversation between him and Sarah. He was asking her about me, saying he'd heard some concerning things and wanted to know if they were true. And Sarah's response was detailed, methodical. She told him I was unstable, that I had a history of manipulating people, that I couldn't be trusted, that he should keep his distance for his own good. I stared at that email for a solid 10 minutes, reading it over and over, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't some offhand comment. This was calculated, specific, and it was about me. I scrolled up through the chain, and that's when I saw there were other emails, other conversations. She'd been doing this with multiple people, employers I'd applied to work for, guys I'd gone on dates with, friends I'd been trying to reconnect with. She'd reached out to all of them, unsolicited, and fed them lies about me. But that wasn't even the worst part. I started going through my sent folder, my trash, anywhere I could find old emails. I cross-referenced dates and names, and I realized she'd been doing this for 3 years. 3 years of systematically sabotaging my life. Every job rejection, every ghosted date, every friendship that fizzled out, she was behind it. She'd been quietly dismantling my life piece by piece, and I'd had no idea. I felt sick. This person I trusted, who I'd confided in about how isolated I felt, who I'd cried to about feeling like I was failing at everything, she was the one causing it. And she'd just sat there, listening to me fall apart, knowing exactly why it was happening. I didn't confront her right away. I needed proof, real, undeniable proof. So I spent the next week reaching out to people, carefully. I contacted the mutual friend who'd accidentally sent me the email and asked if there were others. He felt terrible and forwarded me everything he had. I reached out to a few other people I trusted and asked if Sarah had ever said anything about me. Some of them admitted she had. They showed me messages, emails, screenshots of conversations where she'd painted me as someone completely unrecognizable. I printed everything, built a file, and then I called her. I told her we needed to talk. She suggested coffee, all casual and friendly, like nothing was wrong. We met at a place we used to go to all the time, and I brought the folder with me. I didn't even sit down. I just put it on the table in front of her and told her to open it. She looked confused at first, then she opened the folder and I watched her face change. She went pale, started flipping through the pages faster, like she was looking for something that would make it not real. But it was all there. Every email, every message, every lie she'd told about me, printed out with dates and timestamps. I asked her why. That's all I wanted to know. Why would she do this? Why would someone who called themselves my best friend spend 3 years trying to destroy my life? She didn't deny it, didn't try to make excuses or say it was a misunderstanding. She just looked at me and said she did it because she was jealous, that she couldn't stand watching me succeed, that every time something good happened to me, it felt like a personal attack on her. So she decided to level the playing field. If she couldn't have the things I had, then I shouldn't have them either. The audacity of just saying that out loud, like it was reasonable. She said she needed to protect people from me, that I was too confident, too lucky, too everything, that I didn't deserve the opportunities I was getting, so she took it upon herself to make sure I didn't get them. And the worst part was, she didn't even seem sorry. She seemed annoyed that I'd found out. I told her we were done, that I never wanted to see or hear from her again, that if she contacted me, I'd file a restraining order. She tried to backtrack then, said she didn't mean it, that she was going through a hard time and took it out on me. But I was already walking away. I spent the next month doing damage control. I reached out to everyone she'd contacted and explained what had happened, showed them the proof. Some people believed me immediately and apologized for cutting me off. Others were skeptical at first, but when I showed them the emails, the pattern, the sheer volume of lies she'd spread, they came around. A few employers I'd applied to actually reached back out, said they'd reconsidered my application in light of new information. I didn't end up taking any of those jobs. Honestly, the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth, but it was validating to know I hadn't been rejected because I wasn't good enough. I'd been rejected because someone I trusted had sabotaged me. The dating thing was harder to fix. Most of the guys she'd contacted had moved on, and I wasn't interested in restarting something that had been poisoned from the beginning. But I did start dating again, and this time I was a lot more careful about who I told. And here's where it gets absurd. Sarah tried to apologize. Multiple times. She sent me letters, emails, messages through mutual friends. She even showed up at my apartment once, crying, saying she'd made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I didn't open the door. I didn't respond to the messages. I blocked her on everything and told our mutual friends that if they wanted to stay in touch with her, that was their choice, but I didn't want to hear about it. Some of them picked sides. A few stayed friends with her, which honestly told me everything I needed to know about them. But most people saw her for what she was, a jealous, manipulative person who'd spent years tearing someone down because she couldn't handle her own insecurities. I rebuilt my life. It took time. I had to relearn how to trust people, how to believe that when something good happened, it was real and not about to be ripped away. I had to stop second-guessing every interaction, wondering if someone had been fed lies about me. It's been 2 years now. I have a job I love, friends who actually support me, a life that feels stable and real, and I don't think about Sarah much anymore. Every once in a while, someone will bring her up, mention they saw her somewhere or heard she's doing whatever, and I just shrug. She's not my problem anymore. But I did learn something from all of this. Some people are just poison. They smile to your face and stab you in the back, and they sleep just fine at night doing it. And the hardest part is realizing that the person destroying your life might be the one you trust most. I'm glad I found out. I'm glad I confronted her. I'm glad I cut her off, because staying in that friendship would have been worse than any damage she'd already done. At least now I know who I'm dealing with, and I know who I'm not. Jealousy can poison friendships, but it can also destroy entire family legacies. I never expected a family reunion to turn into a public execution, but that's basically what happened. We were all gathered at my uncle's house for the annual summer barbecue. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, the whole extended family. It's usually pretty chill. People catch up, kids run around, someone burns the burgers, standard family stuff. I was standing by the drink table when my Aunt Carol walked up to the center of the yard and got everyone's attention. She said she had something important to share, something the family needed to know for their own safety. Then she looked directly at me and told everyone I was a drug addict. She said I'd been using for years, that I'd stolen money from her purse to fund my habit, that she'd tried to help me, tried to get me into rehab, but I'd refused. She said she was sharing this now because she was worried about the younger cousins being around me, that I was dangerous and unpredictable. I stood there with a cup of lemonade in my hand, completely blindsided. I've never done drugs. Never. I don't even drink that much. The most illegal thing I've ever done is speed on the highway, and here she was telling my entire family I was some kind of junkie criminal. People started staring, whispering. My younger cousin's parents literally pulled their kids away from me. My uncle asked if it was true. I said no, obviously not, and that I had no idea what she was talking about. But my aunt just kept going, said I was in denial, that addicts always lie, that she had proof but didn't want to embarrass me further. Except she had no proof, because none of it was real. Half the family believed her instantly. The other half looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. No one defended me. Not one person stood up and said, "Hey, maybe we should hear his side before we assume he's a drug addict based on zero evidence." I left, just walked out of the barbecue, got in my car and drove home. I was furious, humiliated, confused. Why would she do this? We barely interacted. I couldn't think of a single reason she'd have to destroy my reputation like that. I didn't hear from anyone for 2 days. Then my grandmother called. She asked me to come over, said we needed to talk. When I got to her house, she looked tired, sad. She sat me down and told me the truth. Decades ago, before I was even born, my Aunt Carol had an affair with my mum's fiancé. My mum was engaged, planning a wedding, building a future with this guy, and her own sister slept with him, got pregnant. The whole thing blew up the engagement, obviously. My mum was devastated. But here's the part that surprised me. My mum forgave her. It took time, but she forgave Carol. They rebuilt their relationship. The family moved on. Carol had the baby, raised him as a single mum, and everyone just pretended it never happened. Except Carol never forgave herself. My grandmother said Carol had been carrying that guilt for 30 years, and for some reason she'd started projecting it onto me. Maybe because I reminded her of my mum. Maybe because I was around the same age she was when it happened. I don't know. But she'd been making little comments about me for years, implying I was irresponsible, untrustworthy, seeding doubt. The drug accusation was her breaking point. My grandmother didn't know what triggered it, but Carol had apparently convinced herself that ruining my reputation would somehow balance the scales for what she'd done to my mum, which is completely unhinged, but okay. I asked my grandmother why she was telling me this now. She said because I deserved to know the truth, and because Carol needed to face what she'd done instead of continuing to project her guilt onto innocent people. I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be Carol's emotional punching bag because she couldn't deal with her own past. So I planned. The next family gathering was my cousin's wedding. Big event. Everyone would be there. I reached out to a few family members I trusted, the ones who hadn't immediately believed Carol's lies, and told them what my grandmother had shared. I asked them to back me up if needed. Then I waited. At the reception, during the open mic speeches, I stood up. I kept it calm. I said I wanted to address something that had been said about me at the last family reunion. I said I'd been publicly accused of being a drug addict and a thief, and that I wanted to set the record straight. Carol's face went white. She tried to interrupt, but I kept talking. I said I'd never used drugs, never stolen from anyone, and that I'd spent the last few weeks trying to understand why someone would make up such serious accusations about me. Then I said I'd learned something interesting about family history, about how guilt and shame can make people do irrational things, how sometimes people hurt others because they can't forgive themselves. I didn't name her directly, didn't lay out the affair, but I looked right at her while I said it, and she knew. The family members I'd talked to beforehand knew, and Carol knew that I knew. She stood up shaking and just started talking. She admitted she'd lied, said she'd made up the drug story because she was projecting. Because she'd done something terrible years ago and never forgave herself. She started crying, talking about the affair, about the guilt, about how she saw herself in me and couldn't stand it. The room went silent. People who'd shunned me at the barbecue looked horrified. My mum, who'd been sitting quietly, looked like she'd been hit by a truck, because even though she'd forgiven Carol, having it brought up in front of the entire family at a wedding was not exactly ideal. Then came the breaking point. Carol's son, my cousin, the one she'd had as a result of the affair, stood up and asked what she was talking about. He'd never been told. She'd apparently told him his father was some guy who left before he was born. Not that his father was his aunt's ex-fiancé. Not that his existence was the result of a family betrayal. He lost it. Started yelling at her, asked how she could lie to him his entire life, asked if anyone else in the family knew. People started nodding. His whole reality just shattered in the middle of a wedding reception. Carol tried to explain, tried to apologize, but it was too late. The damage was done. My cousin walked out. Carol ran after him. The reception basically ended early because no one knew what to say or do. My reputation was restored, though. People apologized to me, said they shouldn't have believed the accusations without proof. My mum pulled me aside later and thanked me for defending myself, but also asked if I could have done it at literally any other time than her nephew's wedding. Fair point. Carol and I don't speak anymore. Her son doesn't speak to her either, last I heard. He found out the truth about his father and it wrecked their relationship. The family reunions are smaller now, quieter. A lot of people stopped coming because things got too awkward. I don't feel great about how it all went down. I didn't want to blow up a wedding or destroy Carol's relationship with her son. I just wanted people to stop treating me like a criminal based on lies. But the truth has consequences. And Carol's truth, the one she'd been hiding for 30 years, finally caught up with her. She tried to ruin me to make herself feel better about her own mistakes. And in the process, she lost the one person she'd been protecting all along. Her son. The family might have forgiven her decades ago, but he didn't. And now she has to live with that. I got my reputation back, but our family will never be the same. Old family secrets can resurface in ugly ways, but some betrayals hit even harder when they're happening in real time. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to look through someone else's messages. I always believed privacy was sacred, that trust meant not snooping, even when you had the chance. But sometimes life puts something right in front of you, and ignoring it feels impossible. My girlfriend and I had been together for about 1.5 years. Things seemed good, not perfect, but good. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our plans for the future. I thought we were solid. She'd tell me she loved me. We'd talk about moving in together, normal relationship stuff. One night she was at my place and left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she went to take a shower. I was sitting on the couch scrolling on my phone when I heard a notification ping from her computer. Then another, then 3 more in quick succession. I glanced over. The screen was still lit up, showing her desktop. A notification banner popped up from a group chat called The Council. I'd heard her mention it before, her close friend group, 4 or 5 women she'd known since college. They talked constantly, shared everything, the kind of tight-knit group where everyone knows everyone's business. The preview of the message made my stomach drop. It was from one of her friends, and it said, "Is he still talking about his promotion?" Oh my God. My promotion. I'd gotten a new role at work a few weeks back. Nothing huge, but I was proud of it. I'd told her about it, and she'd seemed happy for me. Celebrated with me, told me she was proud. I know I shouldn't have clicked. I know it was a violation of privacy, but I couldn't stop myself. I walked over to the laptop and opened the group chat. What I found made me feel physically sick. Months of messages, hundreds of them, and they were all about me. Her friends mocked everything. My job, calling it boring and low tier. My appearance, picking apart things I was insecure about. My family, laughing about how my mum was overbearing and my dad was awkward. They even talked about intimate details of our relationship. Things I thought were private, things I'd never want anyone else to know. But the thing that broke me was seeing what my girlfriend had written. She wasn't defending me. She was leading the charge. She called me a placeholder, said she was settling until someone with more ambition came along. Joked about how I wasn't her type, but I was nice enough for now. Laughed along when her friends made cruel comments. One message stood out. Her friend had asked why she was still with me if she felt that way. My girlfriend responded, "Honestly, he's convenient. Pays for dates, doesn't ask too many questions, and I don't have to try that hard. I'll upgrade eventually." I stood there staring at the screen, reading message after message, and I just felt hollow. This person I loved, who I thought loved me, had been tearing me apart behind my back for months, and her friends, people I'd met and been nice to, were all in on it. I heard the shower turn off. I didn't have much time. I pulled out my phone and started taking screenshots. Every cruel message, every mocking comment, every joke at my expense. I saved them all to my cloud, backed them up in 3 places, and then closed the laptop like nothing had happened. She came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, hair still damp, smiling at me. Asked what I wanted to do for dinner. I told her I wasn't feeling great and that I was going to head home. She seemed concerned, asked if I was okay, said she could make me soup. I said I just needed to sleep it off. I left, went home, and I started packing. I didn't have a lot of stuff at her place, but enough that it would take a few trips. I grabbed everything that night. Clothes, toiletries, a few books, my phone charger. Anything that tied me to her apartment. I left my key on the counter and walked out. She texted me around midnight asking if I was feeling better. Then again, an hour later, asking where I was. Then she called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying she was worried and asking me to let her know I was okay. The next morning, I didn't respond. I spent the time organizing the screenshots into a Google Doc. Chronological order, every message, every comment. I added context where it was needed, made sure it was clear who was saying what. Then I set the sharing settings to anyone with the link can view. She called again that afternoon. I finally answered. She asked what was going on, why I wasn't responding, if something had happened. I stayed calm, told her I'd found her group chat, that I'd seen everything, that I knew exactly what she and her friends thought of me. She went silent. Then she started stumbling over her words, saying it wasn't what it looked like, that it was just venting, that everyone complains about their partners sometimes, that I was overreacting. I told her I'd screenshot everything and that I was done. She panicked, started begging me not to share them, said it would ruin her friendships, ruin her reputation, that I was violating her privacy by reading her messages in the first place. I told her she'd violated a lot more than my privacy by spending months mocking me to her friends. Then I sent her the link to the Google Doc and hung up. But that wasn't even the worst part. I also sent the link to a few mutual friends, people who knew both of us, people who'd hung out with us as a couple and probably thought we were happy. I didn't add commentary, didn't explain, just sent the link and let the messages speak for themselves. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up. Friends texting me saying they had no idea, that they were sorry, that they couldn't believe she'd said those things. A few people reached out to her directly and confronted her. She tried to deny it at first, then switched to saying I'd manipulated the screenshots, then finally admitted it but said I'd taken everything out of context. Nobody was buying it. Her friend group started fracturing. Turns out some of the women in that chat weren't as okay with the cruelty as others. A couple of them reached out to me privately and apologized, said they'd gone along with it because they didn't want to cause drama in the group, but that they felt terrible. One of them said she'd been planning to distance herself anyway because the chat had become toxic. Two of her friends completely cut her off, said they didn't want to associate with someone who treated their partner like that. The rest stayed loyal to her, but the group was never the same. My ex kept texting me, begging me to take down the doc, saying I'd ruined her life, that people were judging her, that she'd lost friends over this. I told her she'd ruined it herself by writing those messages in the first place, that I didn't create the problem, I just exposed it. She tried to flip it, said I was a horrible person for invading her privacy, that looking at her messages without permission was a betrayal, that I was just as bad as her, if not worse. I didn't engage. What was the point? She wasn't going to take accountability. She was just going to keep trying to make me the villain so she didn't have to face what she'd done. We broke up officially a few days later. She sent a long message saying she'd made mistakes, but that I'd made it impossible to move forward, that posting her private messages was cruel and vindictive, that she hoped I was happy with myself. Honestly, I was. Not happy that it happened. Not happy that someone I loved had been trashing me for months, but happy that I found out before I wasted any more time. Happy that I didn't propose like I'd been planning to. Happy that I didn't move in with her and bind my life even closer to someone who saw me as temporary and convenient. I dodged a bullet. A big one. Looking back, I don't regret reading those messages. I know some people will say I shouldn't have looked, that it was wrong. But if I hadn't, I'd still be with someone who didn't respect me, who was counting down the days until someone better came along, who laughed about me with her friends while pretending to love me to my face. The doc stayed up for about a week before I took it down. By then, everyone who needed to see it had seen it. The damage was done, not to me, to her. And honestly, she did that to herself. I'm in a better place now, single but better. I'm not interested in dating for a while. I need to rebuild my trust in people, but I know what I won't tolerate anymore. And I know that the right person won't need a group chat to vent about how much they're settling. My ex tried to reach out a few months later, said she'd been in therapy and wanted to apologize. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late, and some people only feel sorry once they face consequences. I'm good, and I'm glad I found out when I did. Group chats can expose the ugliest truths, but so can a single letter that was never meant to be read. Family reunions are supposed to be awkward in that normal way, right? Bad casserole, relatives asking about your job, somebody's kid breaking something expensive. Standard stuff. Nobody expects them to implode in a way that changes the entire family dynamic forever. But that's exactly what happened at ours. We'd been planning this reunion for months. My grandmother had insisted on it. She wanted everyone together one more time, she said, while she was still healthy enough to enjoy it. So we rented out this community center, got catering, made a whole weekend out of it. Cousins flew in from different states. People I hadn't seen in years showed up. It was actually kind of nice at first. My Uncle Ted was put in charge of organizing the gift exchange. Nothing fancy, just a tradition where we all write cards to my grandparents and present them during dinner. My grandmother loves that kind of thing. Sentimental moments, everyone saying something nice. It's cheesy, but harmless. Ted had collected all the cards in advance and put them in envelopes on a table near the front. During dinner, he started handing them out, and my grandfather would read them aloud. Sweet messages from grandkids, memories from my mom and her siblings, the usual heartfelt stuff. Then Ted grabbed an envelope that looked like the others, same size, same color. He handed it to my Uncle Rick, the youngest of my mom's brothers, and asked him to read it aloud since my grandfather's voice was getting tired. Rick opened it, pulled out the letter, and started reading. And within about 10 seconds, the entire room realized something was very, very wrong. The letter wasn't a birthday card. It was old. The paper was yellowed. The handwriting was my grandfather's, but from decades ago. And the words coming out of Rick's mouth were not meant for a family audience. It was a letter to someone named Catherine. A letter detailing my grandfather's feelings for her. How he couldn't stop thinking about her. How his marriage to my grandmother had become empty. How he wanted to leave. How he'd been planning to file for divorce and start a new life with Catherine instead. Rick's voice faltered halfway through. He looked up confused, and that's when he saw my grandmother's face. She was sitting at the head table, fork still in her hand, staring at Rick like she'd been slapped. The room had gone completely silent. No one was eating. No one was moving. Just dead silence and the sound of my grandfather's decades-old confession being read aloud to 50 family members. Rick stopped reading, looked at my grandfather, who had gone pale, then back at my grandmother. He stammered something like, I'm sorry, I didn't know, but the damage was already done. My grandmother stood up, didn't say a word, just pushed her chair back, set down her napkin, and walked out of the room. My mom and my aunt went after her, but she waved them off. She got in her car and drove home, left the reunion entirely. The room erupted, people talking over each other. My Uncle Ted frantically checking the other envelopes, trying to figure out how that letter ended up in the pile. My grandfather sitting there, head in his hands, not saying anything. Cousins asking what just happened. Kids being ushered out by their parents who didn't want them hearing the fallout. I grabbed the letter from Rick, read it myself. It was dated 38 years ago, written but never sent. My grandfather had apparently written it in a moment of doubt or weakness or whatever you want to call it, but he'd never gone through with it. He'd stayed, raised his kids, built a life with my grandmother. But she'd never known. She'd spent almost 4 decades thinking their marriage had been solid, that he'd chosen her every single day. And now, in front of the entire family, she'd learned that at one point, he'd wanted out, that there had been someone else, that he'd planned an entirely different future that didn't include her. The reunion pretty much ended after that. People left in clusters. Awkward goodbyes, a lot of uneaten food. My Uncle Ted was beside himself. He kept saying he had no idea how that letter got mixed in with the cards, that he'd only grabbed envelopes from the card box. He didn't know where it came from. Turns out my grandfather had been going through old boxes in his attic a few weeks before the reunion, organizing things, probably found the letter, panicked, and tried to hide it. He'd apparently stuck it in a random envelope and put it with a stack of papers he planned to shred later. Ted must have grabbed it by mistake when he was collecting the cards, thinking it was part of the pile. An honest mistake. A terrible, life-altering, honest mistake. My grandmother didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Not my grandfather. Not her kids. Not me. She just shut down. My mum tried calling her every day. Left voicemails, sent texts. Nothing. My aunt drove to her house and she wouldn't answer the door. My grandfather was a mess. He tried to explain. Sent her letters, actual letters, trying to tell his side. That he'd written that letter in a moment of weakness, that he'd never sent it because he realized he didn't mean it, that he'd chosen her, that he'd stayed and never regretted it. But here's the thing, even if he never sent it, he still wrote it, he still felt it, and now she knew. The family split. Some people sided with my grandmother, saying she had every right to be devastated. Others defended my grandfather, saying it was almost 40 years ago and he'd proven his commitment by staying. Arguments broke out in group chats. People stopped talking to each other. The whole family fractured over a letter that should have been destroyed decades ago. And here's where it gets absurd. It came out that Catherine, the woman from the letter, had been my grandmother's co-worker, someone she'd considered a friend. They'd worked together at the same school for years. My grandmother had invited her to family events, talked to her about her marriage, trusted her. And the whole time, apparently, my grandfather had been having an affair, or at least an emotional one. The letter didn't specify, but the tone made it clear there was something there. My grandmother felt betrayed twice, once by my grandfather and again by someone she'd thought was her friend. The fact that it happened decades ago didn't matter. To her it was fresh. It was new information that recontextualized her entire marriage. My Uncle Ted apologized 100 times, wrote my grandmother a long letter explaining it was an accident, that he'd never intentionally hurt her. She eventually responded, said she knew it wasn't his fault, that she didn't blame him. But the relationship was strained. He stopped coming to family events for a while because he felt too guilty. It took almost 3 months before my grandmother agreed to talk to my grandfather. They went to therapy, worked through it, or tried to. I don't know all the details because that's private, but they're still together, living in the same house, going through the motions. But something changed. You can see it when they're together. There's a distance now, a guardedness. My grandmother doesn't look at him the same way, and honestly, I don't think she ever will. The family reunion, the one that was supposed to bring everyone together, ended up tearing us apart. We haven't had another one since. Probably won't for a long time. Maybe ever. The whole thing is a reminder that some secrets are meant to stay buried. That just because something didn't happen doesn't mean it didn't matter. My grandfather didn't leave. He didn't cheat. Or maybe he did, and we just don't know the full story. But he thought about it. He planned it. And now everyone knows. My Uncle Ted still feels horrible. Brings it up sometimes even though we tell him to let it go. He didn't know. It was an accident. But accidents can still destroy things. I think about that letter sometimes. About how one piece of paper, written decades ago and never sent, managed to rewrite an entire family's history. About how my grandmother went from celebrating her marriage to questioning every moment of it. All because someone grabbed the wrong envelope. Life's weird like that. One small mistake and everything changes. Accidental betrayals are painful, but calculated ones. Those cut the deepest, especially when they come from someone you'd never suspect. I'd been working at this company for 4 years, started as an entry-level analyst, worked my way up to a senior position, built relationships, earned respect, or at least I thought I had. My boss, a VP named Richard, had always been a little too friendly. Inappropriate comments, unnecessary touches on the shoulder, invitations to dinners that felt less professional and more personal. I brushed it off for a long time because I needed the job and didn't want to make waves. Then it escalated. He started making explicit comments about my appearance, suggesting we take trips together, implying that my career advancement depended on how cooperative I was willing to be. One night after a company event, he cornered me in the parking garage and put his hand on my waist, leaning in close and saying things I won't repeat. I pushed him away and left immediately. I reported it to HR the next day, filled out all the forms, provided dates, specific incidents, even text messages he'd sent that crossed the line. The HR director, a woman named Patricia, assured me they'd take it seriously, said they had a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, told me I'd done the right thing by coming forward. Weeks went by. Nothing. I followed up twice, and both times Patricia told me the investigation was ongoing, that these things take time, that I should be patient. Then I got called into a meeting. Patricia and Richard's boss, the CFO, sat me down and told me I was being placed on a performance improvement plan, said my work had been slipping, that I'd missed deadlines and made errors, that if I didn't show significant improvement in 30 days, my employment would be terminated. I was blindsided. My performance had been fine, great even. I'd just closed a major project ahead of schedule. I asked what specific issues they were referring to, and they handed me a document outlining alleged mistakes I'd never made. Reports I'd supposedly submitted late that I had email proof were on time, errors in analysis that didn't exist in any of my actual work. It was retaliation, obvious, blatant retaliation. They were setting me up to be fired, so I dropped the harassment complaint. I didn't drop it, I escalated. I contacted the State Labor Board and filed a formal complaint for both harassment and retaliation. I also hired a lawyer who specialized in employment law. She told me to request all company files related to my case under discovery: emails, memos, performance reviews, anything with my name on it. The company dragged their feet, but legally they had to comply. When the files finally came through, I spent an entire weekend going through them with my lawyer, and what we found was so much worse than I expected. There were internal emails between Richard and Patricia, messages where he asked her to bury my complaint, where he offered her a bonus if she made the problem go away. She agreed. In writing, they discussed how to fabricate performance issues to justify firing me. Patricia even suggested specific incidents to include in the improvement plan, things she knew weren't true. But that wasn't even the worst part. Digging deeper into Richard's files, we found financial discrepancies, expense reports that didn't match receipts, vendor payments to companies that didn't exist, transfers from company accounts to personal ones. Richard had been embezzling, for years, hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more. He'd been using fake invoices, shell companies, and falsified records to siphon money out of the organization. And Patricia knew. There were emails where she warned him to be more careful, where she helped him cover tracks. They were both in on it. My lawyer's eyes lit up when she saw it. She said this wasn't just an employment case anymore. This was criminal, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. She told me we needed to hand everything over to federal authorities immediately. We did. I contacted the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division, turned over every document, every email, every piece of evidence we had. They opened an investigation within days. The company got wind of it fast. The CEO called me personally, apologized profusely, said he had no idea what Richard and Patricia had been doing, offered me my job back with a promotion. I declined, told him I'd never feel safe working there again. He asked what it would take to settle. My lawyer negotiated. We demanded a six-figure payout, a public statement clearing my name, and full cooperation with the federal investigation. They agreed to all of it. Richard and Patricia were both fired immediately, escorted out by security. The company issued a statement saying they'd discovered financial misconduct and were cooperating with authorities. My name wasn't mentioned, but word got around. Colleagues reached out. Some apologized for not supporting me earlier. Others admitted they'd suspected something was wrong, but were too afraid to speak up. The federal case moved forward. Richard was arrested 3 months later, charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and about a dozen other counts. Patricia was charged as an accomplice. They both tried to cut deals, but the evidence was overwhelming. Richard ended up pleading guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He got 8 years in federal prison. Patricia got 5. I got my settlement, a substantial amount that I'm not going to disclose, but enough to live comfortably for a while and take time to figure out my next move. The company also agreed to cover my legal fees, which had been piling up. Justice served, but it didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. I won. Richard's in prison. Patricia's career is destroyed. I got paid, but I also lost 4 years of my life working for someone who saw me as disposable. I lost friends at that company who didn't believe me or didn't care enough to help. I lost a sense of security I'd built over years of hard work. And here's where it gets absurd. Richard tried to contact me from prison, sent me a letter through his lawyer asking me to write a statement for his parole hearing, saying he was sorry, that he'd made mistakes, that he hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive him. I didn't respond. Some people don't deserve forgiveness. Some people deserve exactly what they get. I'm working somewhere new now, smaller company, better culture. I'm careful, hyper-aware. I document everything, save every email, record every meeting I'm allowed to. I don't trust easily anymore, and maybe that's a loss too. But it's also survival. What I learned from all this is that institutions don't protect you. HR doesn't work for you, they work for the company. And sometimes the only way to get justice is to fight for it yourself, even when the system is designed to make you give up. I'm glad I didn't give up. I'm glad I kept every email, every text, every piece of evidence, because without that, Richard and Patricia would still be there, still harassing people, still stealing, still getting away with it. They handed me the rope by being arrogant enough to document their crimes, and I used it. Corporate corruption is one thing, but being gaslit by the person who's supposed to love you, that's a special kind of cruel. I started noticing the late nights about 3 months ago. My wife would text me saying she had to stay at the office. Meetings ran long, last-minute projects. Her boss needed something urgent. At first, I believed it. Her job was demanding. It made sense. But then it kept happening. 4 nights a week turned into 5. She'd come home after 10, exhausted, barely wanting to talk. She stopped asking about my day, stopped making plans for the weekend. We went from having dinner together every night to me eating alone while she worked late and came home smelling like she'd been somewhere other than her office. I tried not to be that person, the suspicious spouse who jumps to conclusions. But I couldn't ignore the signs, the way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting, the new clothes she bought but said were for work, the fact that she seemed distracted all the time, like her mind was somewhere else. I thought she was having an affair. I really did, and I hated myself for thinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling. So I decided to confront her. No games, no hiring a private investigator or snooping through her phone, just a direct conversation. I waited until she got home one night, sat her down, and told her we needed to talk. I asked her if she was seeing someone else, if there was something going on that I should know about, and I watched her face crumble. She started crying immediately, not the defensive kind of crying where someone's caught and trying to cover. Real, deep, gut-wrenching sobs. I thought I'd been right, that she was about to confess, but then she said something I wasn't expecting. She wasn't cheating on me. She thought I was cheating on her. I just stared at her, completely blindsided. I asked her what she was talking about. I wasn't cheating. I'd never cheated. I barely left the house except for work and the gym. Where did she get that idea? She told me she'd hired a private investigator 2 months ago, someone who came highly recommended from a friend of a friend. She'd been meeting with him regularly, paying him to follow me, track my movements, find proof of the affair she was convinced I was having. And he'd found it, or at least that's what he told her. He'd shown her photos of me with another woman, receipts from restaurants I'd supposedly taken her to, hotel records, text message logs, an entire fabricated trail of infidelity that she'd been paying him thousands of dollars to uncover. She said she'd been planning to file for divorce, that she'd already consulted a lawyer, that she was just waiting for the right moment to confront me with everything. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I wasn't cheating. I'd never cheated. And now I was being accused of it based on fake evidence from some scam artist private investigator. I asked to see the evidence. She pulled out a folder. Photos, receipts, printed emails, all of it pointing to an affair that never happened. I looked through everything, and none of it made sense. The woman in the photos wasn't anyone I knew. The restaurants were places I'd never been. The hotel records were from cities I hadn't visited. I pulled up my bank statements right there on my phone. Showed her every transaction from the last 6 months. No mystery charges, no hotel stays, no romantic dinners, just groceries, gas, and the occasional takeout. I showed her my GPS history from my phone. Every place I'd been. Work, home, the gym, the grocery store. Nowhere suspicious. Nowhere that matched the investigator's timeline. She stared at the evidence, her evidence and mine, and I watched the realization hit her. She'd been scammed. This guy had taken her money and fed her lies, and she believed him because she was already suspicious, already looking for proof of something that wasn't there. But that wasn't even the worst part. We started digging into the investigator, looked him up online. Turns out he wasn't licensed. He'd been running this scam for years, targeting people who were already paranoid about their relationships and feeding them fake evidence so they'd keep paying him. There were reviews from other people who'd hired him, all saying the same thing. He fabricated proof, took their money, ruined their marriages. My wife had paid him over $8,000, money we didn't really have, money she'd pulled from our joint savings without telling me because she didn't want me to know what she was doing. We were both sitting there, in our living room, realizing we'd almost destroyed our marriage over lies. She thought I was cheating. I thought she was cheating, and neither of us had just talked to each other like adults. We reported the investigator to the authorities, filed a complaint with the state licensing board, tried to get our money back, though we knew it was a long shot. Last I heard, he'd shut down his business and disappeared, probably moved to another city to run the same scam on new victims. My wife and I decided to go to therapy, not because we didn't trust each other anymore, but because we needed help rebuilding what had been broken. The therapist told us that outside forces manipulating a relationship can be just as damaging as actual infidelity, that we'd both been victims of someone who preyed on insecurity and doubt. Therapy helped. It took months, but we started communicating again. Really communicating. Talking about our fears, our insecurities, the things we'd been too scared to say out loud. We realized we'd both been so afraid of losing each other that we'd started seeing threats that weren't there. Things went from bad to unhinged when we found out the investigator had used some of our personal information to open credit accounts in my wife's name. We caught it early, froze everything, filed reports, but it added another layer of violation to the whole mess. This guy hadn't just scammed us financially and emotionally, he'd tried to ruin us in every way possible. It took a year before things felt normal again. A year of therapy, of rebuilding trust, of learning to be vulnerable with each other instead of suspicious. We're still together, stronger than before, honestly. But we'll never forget how close we came to losing everything. The whole experience taught me that trust isn't just about fidelity. It's about communication. It's about not letting fear and doubt fester until they become bigger than the relationship itself. And it's about recognizing when someone outside your marriage is trying to destroy it for their own gain. We laugh about it now sometimes. Dark humor. The time we almost got divorced because we both thought the other was cheating, and neither of us actually was, but it's not really funny. It's a reminder of how fragile things can be, how easy it is for lies to take root when you stop talking to each other. I don't know what happened to the investigator. I hope he got what he deserved. I hope other people saw through his scam before it was too late. But I know there are more people like him out there, preying on suspicion, profiting off broken trust. My wife and I are okay now, better than okay. We check in with each other constantly, talk about things that bother us before they become assumptions. We don't let things sit and fester. And we definitely don't hire private investigators. Trust, once broken by outside forces, takes years to rebuild. But it's possible. We're proof of that. And we're not letting anyone, real or fabricated, come between us again. And that's where we'll close the book on tonight's stories. 15 lives turned upside down, 15 truths exposed, and 15 reminders that the people closest to us aren't always who we think they are. But here's the thing, truth always finds a way to surface, even when it's buried deep. If you've made it this far into the chaos, you're officially part of the club. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let me know which story hit the hardest. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, lock your doors, check your attics, and always, always read the metadata. I'll see you in the next one.